Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions concerning this watch. Today, a long-awaited rock star watch makes its debut on the channel. This watch is both a rock star in the sense that it is famous and renowned, and it is also the watch that I imagine a rock star would wear. It is also a watch by a rock star, a pair of them actually, Stephen McDonnell, watchmaker, and Max Busser, who is an endless font of imagination. You're looking at the Legacy Machine Sequential EVO Double Chronograph, a 2022 launch that won the GPHG Aiguille, effectively Best Pictures at the Oscars of Watchmaking. This is a zirconium-cased watch, although as you can see, it's probably fair to call it half sapphire, half zirconium, because the amount of sapphire surface is so great on this watch. Zirconium is lighter than steel. It's also harder and more scratch-resistant than standard watchmaking steels, so it does have some tangible advantages. And while the watch does feature the Legacy Machine layout, the giant vaulted balance and balance bridge, and the bubble-like sapphire, make no mistake, this is also a sports watch. It is, after all, the Sequential EVO. So with a screw-down crown and a rubber strap and an internal shock absorption system for the movement, this is an 80-meter water-resistant sports watch, and it's even got a little bit of luminescence. But what really sets this watch apart is the double chronograph setup, which can be interpreted as two different chronographs in one case, or an unconventionally synchronized set of chronographs that are linked together. In terms of dimensions, 44 millimeters in diameter, 18.4 millimeters thick, though you can see a lot of that's the case back sapphire and the dial side sapphire, 54 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. And because it uses a screw-fixed proprietary strap system, I'm not going to give a strap width here. It can't be conventionally described in that sense. You're going to want to go full custom or call max if you want a different strap on this watch. Now, it's big, but it's not a brute. Being zirconium and sapphire, it's very light on the wrist. And because Max understands you can build a bigger watch, but not a bigger customer, he's given consideration to ergonomics. These are generously sculpted and tapered lugs, so it actually wears well on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist. And if your wrist is my size or larger, you're going to find this is a good, comfortable fit. It might even slide underneath a jacket cuff. Not a dress cuff, but a jacket cuff. Very comfortable. The strap is substantial. You can see some strakes are molded into it to visually extend the lugs. And this is a brand new MB&F factory strap. No crimping, no gouging. You have this recurring motif on the bottom. You have the GNF Chatelain style leaf spring clasp mechanism that is neither a friction fit nor a trigger clasp. It's its own separate breed. As it closes, the leaf spring applies an enormous amount of downward force. It's a buckling blade concept. That's how that works. So this is not going to pop open on the wrist despite not having a trigger release. Externally, you can see that we feature a MB&F double battle axe motif. I guess Max somewhere in his heritage must have been a Viking, or he must have Vikings in his ancestry. So we've got the double-sided battle axe. Now you'll also find it on the crown. The watch is surprisingly nuanced for a large and bold sports watch design. You can see it features these evacuations in profile and three different finishes on the case: media blast, polish, and then brushed satination. The bezel is effectively not there. It's just a faint silver halo when you view the watch from dead on, because the dial, its functions, and the sapphire come to the fore. And I want to emphasize that this sapphire is more nuanced than you think. It might just look like a bubble from the front, but you can see how the camber changes. And so it's got this little step that's fairly steep, and then it rolls towards the top at a much steeper decline of angle. So you see how it's sort of like this, and then it starts to flatten out. So this is designed to let your cuff or your sleeve ride up over it just a little bit better. It's a thoughtful detail and not an easy one to execute. This was undoubtedly an expensive sapphire. So the watch was designed in conjunction with Stephen McDonnell, who previously was associated with the legacy machine Perpetual, at the time the most complicated MB&F when it debuted. This watch right here is an absolute monster, 59 joules and 585 parts. This is the most complicated MB&F. Part of the reason is that it has two more or less independent chronographs. It has a single power source, one barrel with two mainsprings, a little bit like some Crador Micro Artist Studio watches where you've got two mainsprings but really just one barrel, and then one drivetrain. You could see that it has an escapement, one escapement on the dial side for the enormous balance. Taking a look, you can see that it's designed in a modern fashion, though the appearance, particularly with the slower beat rate, the overcoil, and the large balance, it might be a little bit antiquarian. Make no mistake, this is a free-sprung balance with variable inertia eccentric screws on its rim, and all the timing is done using hairspring manipulation and those masses. The hairspring is an overcoil, so in every orientation with respect to gravity, the watch should be a consistent timekeeper. Because a free-sprung balance will not change its timing when shocked, it's used in this application, and then a full balance bridge, admittedly an extravagant one, anchors the balance on both sides. So that is part of the robustness that's engineered into the sports watch. But there's also an unseen flex ring, which is an elastomer, sort of a piece of rubber, that separates the movement proper from the wall of the case. And that's designed to make this a much more shock-resistant movement. So not only is the architecture robust, but there's actually a little shock absorber in there that goes sight unseen. Screw-down crown, 80 meters of water resistance. You better believe you can swim with it. And there are going to be questions about how this watch actually works. So let me just start with the most puzzling part of this watch, which is the twin verter. You can see how there are 4 conventional chronograph pushers, and they work more or less like you would imagine. So off to one side, we have a column wheel vertical clutch chrono, by the way, making the vertical clutch visible, an unusual approach, but it's a very crisp column wheel action and seamless engagement that can be left running due to the nature of a vertical clutch, and then I could just reset it, and you can see how these things operate independently. I've got the ability to trigger either chronograph, start, stop, and reset it. And this is just a wonderful system if you need to time two things that are completely independent. Because we have 2 separate 30-minute registers, it's a little bit like a Longa double split in that you can time 2 events that are up to 30 minutes. But what really makes it unusual is the way these 2 movements are cross-linked via the twin verter. Now, if they're both stopped, when you press the twin verter, they will both start. And if they're both running and you press the twin verter, they will both stop and resume. The twin verter will not reset the mechanism. But now, what happens if one of them is running and you hit the twin verter? Just like that, it's a relay. One stops, the other starts, and you can switch back. So if you're timing 2 events that are cumulative, for instance, you're performing 2 separate tasks, and you want to know how much time you've devoted to each, as you switch, you can hand off the timing. And so not only can you time 2 events concurrently up to 30 minutes, but you can time them in separate intervals while freezing the other until it's needed. And because of the way the twin verter works, there's no delay in the handoff, so one starts as soon as the other stops. You will have to, of course, if you wish, you will have to, well, let me demonstrate how this works again. Just like that. You will have to reset it conventionally and stop conventionally if you desynchronize the system. So just keep that in mind. The twin verter cannot reset the chronographs. Now, let's take a look right here. You can see that the vertical clutch, which picks up and dumps the engagement of the chronograph, it's that pincer system you see, and it's very rare to be able to view the vertical clutch system on a chronograph. This is one of the few I've ever seen where the mechanism is made visible. Lateral clutches are often preferable in high horology because they look cool and they're very traditional. Vertical clutches tend to be buried in the mechanism. Here, not only do we get a vertical clutch and get to see it, but the clutch shaft in each case has been jeweled, so as little effect as possible is made on the timing of the watch. Most chronographs, when they engage, will slow down the overall timing of the regulator. With these jeweled clutch shafts, you really don't have much of that. So you can engage your chrono without the watch slowly losing time. And keep in mind, time here is really relative. We glorify the chronograph, and then the time of day is minimized. This dial is known as the coal dial or the coal black dial. Just keeping all of our nomenclature straight. One of the features of the legacy machine, since the first one back in 2011, has been that it's sort of a what-if watch. What if an MB&F wristwatch were made back in the era of the pocket watch, the time of early science fiction, the steampunk era, the 1870s, 80s, 90s, and the legacy machine would be the answer to that. As a result, we have elements that are very much like you'd find on a pocket watch, for example. We have this enormous mirror-finished bridge because the first friend collaborating on the original legacy machine was Kari Voutilainen, who added opinions on the shape and proportion of the bridges as well as the standard of finishing. And while he's not credited here, you can see the work of the master still reflected. You can also see all of the underlying steel components of the chronograph have been brushed on their tops and then micro-beveled on their sides. All screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots in circumference. You can see that the locating pegs used to locate things like linear springs on the dial base, those locating pegs have been polished on their top. There's a snailing on the coal black dial, and it's a very finely finished watch. Turn it all over, you can see it becomes even more so on the reverse. Now, it could be that I was wrong about two separate mainsprings in one barrel. It does appear we've got a double barrel setup right here, so I want to clarify that. We can also see that there is a power reserve indicator on the reverse side, and then we have these beautiful engravings, 59 jewels, Swiss made, and the signature of Stephen McDonnell. Take a look at some of the bridges. You can see that there are interior angles where these bevels converge on sharp creases. That takes a lot of time to do, and you can see no expense was spared as these bridges feature satination on their top, polished points where bevels converge, but also interior angles. Taking a quick look, you can appreciate that there's solarization on the barrel covers as well as the ratchet wheels. And then we have golden chaton cups for all of the pivot jewels, which is a lovely nod to the way pocket watches would have been made, where the chaton would be made first, the jewel pressed into that, and then the chaton pressed into the bridges. You can also see light and luminous stripes. And this is a lovely sort of nickel anthracite finish that matches the dial quite well. Everything about this watch is extraordinary, and it's a timepiece that pegs the meter in terms of complexity, fine finish, exclusivity, and star power. Like I said, a rock star watch by a rock star watchmaker, and a watch you could really wear all the time. If you've got the panache to pull it off, this thing is tough enough and practical enough to use every day. So reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.